Welcome to today's last session. Let's dive in. One of the first things that I want to talk about, because I think it's something that we're all dealing with right now, is sleep and how it has been affected. So, Dr. Robin, I want to ask this to you first, and then we'll jump to Dr. Reem and Remy. But why is our sleep being affected so much throughout this pandemic? I mean, as parents, it's been disrupted from the moment we became parents, but
Exactly.
why now? And how can we navigate through that?
Well, like you said, before COVID-19, sleep is an issue for a lot of people. About 30% of the population suffers from clinical sleep depression. However, during COVID-19, during this pandemic, up to 80% of people are reporting that they're significantly sleep deprived. So that's a lot. 8 out of 10 people is a lot of people. So if you're listening today, if you're watching this and you're having trouble sleeping, just please know you're not alone. And the main reason, I really wasn't surprised when the pandemic started happening that sleep was going to become a problem, because the number one reason people have behavioral sleep problems, non-medical sleep problems, is anxiety and stress. And there was actually a study that came out yesterday that said 30% of the population is now clinically anxious, and up to 80% are reporting stress and anxiety. So not a surprise that sleep is going to be affected.
I love that you bring up anxiety and depression. I think that's something that affects all of us. And right now, times are so uncertain that we have so much going on. And I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Reem so that we can talk a little bit about how women and parents in general are being affected, whether maybe they just gave birth and they're developing anxiety, maybe they've been isolated for so long because of the pandemic that they're developing depression. How can you connect that to sleep, and can you give us any tips as to what we can do to get through that?
I think that what Dr. Robin said was precisely it. She was on with that. And what I'm finding is that, well, what I know generally outside of COVID-19 is that sleep impacts our mental health. It impacts really everything. And that's the biggest indicator in what we tell, especially new parents, is that we need to be getting sleep. And I know that sounds impossible as a new parent, but it's something that we need to practice, getting some chunks of sleep. So when we're really stressed out, when we're experiencing severe anxiety, and we're not processing that through the day, and we're not working through that, and we're not creating margin to even care for it even a little bit, we're processing that at nighttime. And I'm finding that a lot of the moms that I work with are having more, I guess you'd say, nightmares, right? I was starting to question myself and my own sleep patterns as all of this was going on, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm having some strange dreams. What is happening here? And I think it reflects the poor coping skills a lot of us are utilizing and that we have right now. So what is my feedback to myself and to all of the parents out there, because I'm one of you? I think it's about creating little space for margin where we are caring for ourselves and understanding and recognizing that I'm feeling anxious and I need to do something about this. Maybe I need to move my body for a little bit. Maybe I need to pick up a new coping skill and start to learn how to, use deep breathing, whatever that may be. But I will say that a lot of the apps right now, like Calm or Headspace, are offering free resources. So I would really look into something like that if you've never done it before, and lean on some of those tools and do some things that you've never done to manage the load.
I love that. And the reason why I wanted to start with sleep is because, as Dr. Robin and Dr. Reem just said, it affects everything. And it affects our mood, affects how we feel, how we see things, how people see us. So, Remy, what can you say about the lack of sleep and how it translates into our parenting? I know that you really like to focus on positive parenting, and that's something that I know for a fact every parent out there is struggling with right now. So what can you tell us about how to cope with that? Oh, I think you're still on mute. You have to unmute. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so I love everything that Dr. Robin and Dr. Reem have said, and especially noticing or acknowledging the fact that we have so much more on our plate, right? Apart from the anxiety and the stress of just the time, the uncertainty of the time, we also have just physically, logically, we're doing more. You know, a lot of us had our kids going to school. We had them going to grandma for the weekend or having play dates. We had things that we would even do as, you know, family time, like we would go out to dinner. So one day a week you're not cooking, now you're cooking 3 meals a day, 7 days a week, plus like 2 snacks, you know, or if your kids are like mine, like 5 snacks. You know, so we're doing a lot more than we've ever done. And even I've even spoken with moms or dads who are like homeschooling parents, and they're like, this is not how we homeschool. This is different. So we're all struggling right now, you know. And so sleep is something that for me right now, I'm adding sleep to the list of my positive discipline tools. Okay, like sleep is now non-negotiable. Like in the middle of this crisis, we need to prioritize sleep. And I'm saying this from my own experience. Like I realized that before COVID, I could go to bed at 11, 12, you know, sometimes I would work late into the night, you know, because in the morning my kids go to school, I can get like 2 more hours and all of those things. Now, if I miss my night sleep, that's it. You know, so it's really, really important for us now to prioritize sleep and now look at sleep differently. You know, when you see sleep differently, don't look at sleep as just something that you do at night. Now look at sleep as this is like my best friend. This is like a gift that I have. This is a gift I'm giving myself, a gift I'm giving my kids. This is something that I have to take seriously, because when you don't sleep, you have those hallucinations which turn into like these crazy dreams, and then you wake up tired, right? You wake up burnt out and you have to do the day over again. And what does that translate to? You start shouting at your kids more. You start shouting at your spouse if you're married. You know, you're not being productive at work, which this is not a good time to not be productive at work. This is a time where you need to be like more productive at work, right? Because everyone is cutting back based on value. Like if you're not bringing value to this company right now, we don't have any reason to keep you on, because we're struggling to keep you on, you know, regardless. So it's so important, you know, to talk about sleep. And thank you for talking about sleep first, because really it's the foundation of everything else that we can get done. Because our human bodies are such that if you don't give your body sleep, after a while it'll take its sleep from you. You know, it's just like if you don't give your body nutrients, it'll start to pull nutrients out of places that it doesn't need to be pulling out, and then you feel unhealthy, right? So it's the same thing with sleep. I know it's the worst time to even talk about sleep, because they're like, how do I sleep? I have so much to do. You just have to do less, and you have to be okay with that, because if not, then you start if there's anything as like positive discipline, then there's negative discipline, right? And then you start, and you want to make sure that you don't live this season worse. Like your family, you don't break up your family so much in this COVID time that after COVID you're having to repair, you know, what you've broken.
I love that you bring that up, because there's something that I think we forget, because we sleep since we're born, right? We're sleeping every night and we take naps as children. And to me, and I think maybe Dr. Robin, you might agree that sleep is a form of self-care. But with that being said, with everything that we're dealing with and struggling with right now, we're trying to wake up early so that we can get work done before our kids wake up. We're trying to stay up late and drinking coffee. What can you tell us about how we can better those sleep habits and maybe some things to avoid so that we can actually feel better?
Sure, I'll definitely answer that. I just want to go back to something that Remy had said. Thank you, Remy, for mentioning that priority. That happens to be my number one tip. When I do corporate workshops and school sleep workshops, what I always ask the attendees is to think of their priority hierarchy and what are the top 5 priorities in their life. The most common answers are, you know, when it's corporate work, employees are saying, I want to do great at my job. Students are saying, I want to do great in school. I want to be physically fit. I want to keep my mental health in check. I want to eat healthy. And sleep often is not part of their priority hierarchy. And what I explain to them is sleep affects every single aspect of your daily life, your physical life, your mental health, your emotional life, and your behavioral life. So how can you, so let's say, for instance, it affects your immune system, especially important now during the pandemic. We want to stay healthy. We want to stay healthy all the time. So that's one of the physical components. It affects how much we eat and the foods that we choose, our healthy food choices during the day. It affects, like I said, our mental health. Anxiety and depression is increased over sleep deprivation. Our behavioral health, it affects us when we're working, our productivity, our efficiency, our inattention, our memory. That's all the things kids need to stay focused in school and do well in school as well. Interpersonally, it affects our relationships. So if sleep affects everything and it's not part of your priority hierarchy, you're not going to succeed in all those things that are number 1 through 5 in your priority hierarchy if you don't move sleep up the ladder. So thank you, Remy, for mentioning that, because that is my number 1 tip. So specifically, some other tips you had said, Ingrid, what can people do now and some mistakes they make? What I'm finding, number 1 problem are sleep schedules during this pandemic. When we first started going and sheltering in place, people started laughing and telling me, oh, I'm going to sleep a lot later. It was a little bit fun. I'm staying up late. I'm binging Netflix because I don't have to get up and commute to work the next day. Teenagers, I'm a mom of 2 teenagers. They're staying up late, playing video games. It's how they're socializing. But sleep deprivation is cumulative. And over time, no one is immune to the negative effects of sleep deprivation. So if you don't get your sleep schedule appropriate and consistent, and you go off track with it, it's going to affect what's called our circadian rhythm, our sleep-wake cycle, and you're going to start sleeping poorly. And over time, what I'm finding now with all of my clients is severe negative effects of sleep deprivation. So sleep scheduling is so important, and consistency, waking up and going to bed about the same time every night, is super important. Again, that's for our sleep-wake cycle, our circadian rhythm. Our bodies thrive on consistency. So it's so much better if you try to wake up the same time every day, even when you don't have to get up for work or kids don't have to necessarily get on the early bus for school. So that's one of my number 1 sleep tip during the pandemic right now. Also, we have to be aware of what we're eating during the day and not eating heavy foods right before bed. So a lot of times the day goes so fast, we're trying to work and parent, maybe get outside for some exercise. Next thing you know, it's 9, 10 o'clock at night. You decide to order in pizza. That's a really bad idea, because our body has to digest while we sleep, and we don't want to eat anything heavy and spicy. We don't want extra reasons to be woken up at night outside of this anxiety that we're all feeling. So our eating healthy is really, really important. Cutting out the caffeine. A lot of us are powering through the day and trying to get a little caffeine at the end of the day. Caffeine actually stays in our bodies for about 5 to 7 hours, which most people don't realize. So staying away from that. And unfortunately, the alcohol. I know a lot of people tend to be having that late day glass of wine after, okay, we deserve it. We got through parenting, homeschooling, working, and it really affects our sleep. Actually, alcohol is a depressant. Most people don't realize that. And it helps us fall asleep, but not stay asleep. So those are some top tips as we move along throughout the day. And then some tips before we go to bed, which is also really important. Like for me, I'm in a very strict sleep bedtime routine and bedtime. My teens always laugh at me. They always say, you're the only mom that has a bedtime. And I always tell my workshop attendees, if you don't have a bedtime, I want you to go tonight and make yourself a bedtime and follow it. And about an hour before then, electronics out of the room. Charging outside, turn them off, take a hot shower. This is really good for kids too. Hot bath or hot shower, and do something relaxing. I forget, one of my co-panelists talked about our dreams and how we're having nightmares now. If you start journaling and getting out your fears on paper, they're less likely to intrude while you go to sleep and wake you up or be, in the form of a scary nightmare. So journaling, yoga, stretching is really good. Anything that you find relaxing that is not on an electronic device is really helpful for sleep.
Dr. Robin, we have a question. Thoughts on melatonin?
I'm asked this all the time. So I actually have a lot of thoughts, but I'm going to try to make it very succinct. And it depends on who it's from, if it's for children or adults. So as far as age is concerned, I don't recommend melatonin for anybody that's not done with puberty. How much you take is an issue too. You always want to start with any, and this is not a medication, but for any medication, you want to start with the least dosage. So if you're going to use it, if there's a doctor saying that you should use it for children, 0.5, you should start for kids, and only 1 milligram for adults. What they have found in research is that, so, okay, let me jump back a little bit. It's a supplement, right? It's not FDA regulated. So people think it's healthy, and that's great that it's not a real medicine, so to speak. But the problem is it's not regulated and not researched. And what they found is that there's about 10 milligrams of melatonin in a lot of products, but that's what the companies report. But when they looked at it, some of them had 10 times as much melatonin as they're reporting on the label. And some actually had half of what they were reporting. Since it's not regulated, you have to be really careful. A lot of times there's other things in it. Sometimes there's CBD thrown in. You really want to look into that. There's other things that you may not want to take and put in your body. So you want to make sure that you're careful with melatonin. The other thing is melatonin was actually used for people that are night shift workers, as well as people that are going through time zones, like when you're jet lagged. So it's not really meant for long-term use. So I say if your sleep-wake cycle is so thrown off, like maybe it is now, and when we're getting out of lockdown and getting back into the real like pre-lockdown schedule, and you haven't worked on your sleep, that can help you get your sleep back on track, but it's not the magic sleeping pill that people think it is, and it's not meant for long-term use. There's no studies on its long-term use. There's no negative effect short-term, but nothing look long-term. So use it to get back on track, but really practicing healthy sleep habits and changing your sleep behavior patterns at night and committing, and like Remy said, the priority of sleep is really the most important thing you can do outside of getting your sleep back on track.
Thank you, Dr. Robin. And I guess with that being said, I want to shift gears a little to guilt and anxiety. Dr. Reem, I guess this one's especially for you, but then we can also hear from Dr. Robin and Remy. Can you tell us a little bit about guilt in general and how it leads to anxiety and depression, or vice versa, and how we can cope with that, especially with the biggest load that we're dealing with right now from work and from parenting?
Yeah. So mom guilt comes up quite a bit in the work that I do, is also on social media. This is something that people are constantly talking about. And I wrote a blog post about this, but I feel guilty about mom guilt. I feel guilty about everything. And that's truly what it feels like sometimes in motherhood. And I think I want to make the distinction between guilt and shame, because I think they often get used interchangeably. But something to know is guilt is we feel like we have done something wrong and it can potentially harm others, like we're doing wrong to others. And shame is this feeling of I feel bad about who I am as a person, and I feel bad about being and not just the doing piece. So these are obviously not terrible feelings to have, because if we're doing something that's wrong, we want to have some emotions come up that are triggering and telling us, okay, this is probably not the best approach. I did something wrong. I need to repair this. However, in motherhood, what we're finding is that moms feel guilty about things that, really are kind of silly, right? I find that when I'm meeting with moms in session, they're saying things like, I want to take some time to myself, but I feel guilty for leaving. Or if I feel guilty for going to work or having to work. I feel guilty. And the list goes on. Obviously, the guilt is about many things. And when we do some exploration and we talk about, where does this guilt come from? What is the expectation? Is your expectation that you're going to be on 24/7? Is it that you're going to be a quote unquote perfect parent? Is it that, we have to really do the exploration on what is this guilt saying? What does it really mean? And where did I create these expectations of what parenthood should look like? Who were my models of parenthood that I've really drawn some of these ideas from? And we hear this a lot obviously, I don't know if it's obvious because I talk to a lot of providers. So I'll just say that when I ask moms or parents, what would you say to a close friend or your child if they said, you know what, I really want to take a break, but I feel bad about it and I don't want to? Or if I want to take a minute to myself and, during nap time today, instead of working, I actually think I want to lay down and rest, but I feel so terrible about it. Would we chastise them or tell them that, yeah, they really shouldn't be feeling that way? So anytime we were having this internal battle of guilt, we work to develop self-compassion, and that is treating ourselves like we treat the people that we love. So I can go on and on and on about self-compassion and the practice of self-compassion, but it's something that is, my work is rooted in, that I really believe. If you haven't purchased or read the book Self-Compassion by Dr. Kristen Neff, I highly recommend that you do it. It's a terrific resource. It's something that I recommend to nearly every single person I meet with, but it really explores that dialogue. And I think it really challenges that mom guilt that we have that says we need to be doing more, we should be more, and all those shoulds, where as therapists, we say you're shitting all over yourself, but that's a bit from me.
So how can we navigate through that without resulting with having a burnout, and then, you know, dealing with our children? And maybe Remy, this is also something that I'd like to hear from you. Is like, we all yell sometimes, we all shout, and it's stressful. We're all dealing with so many different things. So sleep, less caffeine, tips, and shame and guilt. But what about when we're at the point when we have reached it, we are burning out? How can we take a few steps back? And this is for any of you, if you want to jump in.
I don't know if I should just share something a little bit about this. This goes for not just parenting, and I'm going to let Remy talk about this because I think she's got something great to say about positive parenting that I probably need to hear. But when I think about anger or frustration or irritability, and I talk about emotions being a sign, they're a sign of an unmet need. And when we dig deeper, it's not that I'm an angry mom, I'm not an angry person. It's that I have a need that's being unmet, and I have to explore what that is. So do I need to create space for, I don't need to be, managing my kids, or how can I recharge? How can I ask my partner to do something without expecting and having resentment? How am I filling my cup so that I'm not an angry mom? Because I don't think that we're angry people. I think we have a lot of needs that are just kind of being pushed down, especially right now, that we're just like, yeah, well, I can't do that. So let me just, move along. But I want to hear what Remy has to say about positive parenting. I'm going to be taking some notes.
Okay. So for me, one of the things one of my probably my core goal with every parent that I work with is to change their mindset, is to help reset that mindset. So for me, and this is like, I tell everyone, look, I am a recovering shouter. Like that's my title. Forget about being the founder of Grace to Parent and all these cool things. I am a recovering shouter. This is the work that I do every day in myself first. And so one of the things that's really, really important to mention is to set the intention to begin to change your mindset. So for me, just 2 weeks ago, I was feeling burnt out. I was feeling just super stressed. I was feeling like the whole world was crashing. And here was why. So and it was so important for me to go back and think of what was my trigger. So this is what happened. My kids they're now on summer holiday. And so this was like last week or 2 weeks ago, I started to think, okay, my kids are going on holiday on this date. And then I remembered spring break and how we had this fancy plan of going to Mexico and 7 days. And it was all, we had paid since last year and it was great. And then that didn't happen. We were stuck at home with I'm looking at it right now, a little shabby schedule, like a make-believe schedule just to make it seem like, oh, things are still okay. And one of the things that I realized was I didn't want to go through that same experience for summer. Spring break was only 7 days. Summer is 2 months. And I was just starting to panic and just fall into that rabbit hole of, oh my gosh, summer is ruined. COVID has ruined everything. And I started to panic and I started to get anxious. But the reason why I'm saying all of that is I was under the mindset that when spring break was happening, I was saying to myself, Remy, you got this. You can do this. We're almost there. Summer holidays coming. You guys will be, by then, things will be better. You will be able to do this and do that and blah, blah, blah. So I was holding my breath, saying to myself, and I think a lot of us are doing the same thing, saying to myself, just hold on 1 more month. It's almost over. It's almost over. And 1 more month came, and the next month came, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's not going away. It's getting worse. Like things are not changing. And so I started to get anxious. So the first thing I want to tell you guys, and tell myself, remind myself, is change your mindset. We have to start thinking about, and I think this is what this whole Mother Honestly conference is about, is we have to start thinking about how do we navigate this new normal. I know a lot of people are like, oh, if I hear new normal one more time, but listen, this is our new normal. We have to start to navigate our new normal. And I have a free course, Dr. Reem, you should take it. It's called the the free No Shout Challenge. It's 3 days. The first day it tells you why you're shouting. The next day it tells you why your shouting isn't working. And the third day it tells you what to do instead of shouting. Now, this is something that I've taken myself. This is work that I've done myself. And it doesn't just tell you, it helps you. It works. Like it literally like guts you. It goes inside of you and it brings out all the things and puts you face to face with yourself. It's so important now to start to, a lot of times parents don't want to shout, but we don't know what to do instead. So we can talk about sleeping well, we can talk about managing anxiety and all of those things, but what happens when you have a situation you need to address? What happens when your child does something wrong, when discipline needs to be carried out? What do you do then? How do you start to manage? Managing shouting is quite different from managing anxiety. It's quite different from managing your sleep. It's a whole different thing, and so you really have to get to the crux of why am I shouting? Why it's not working? What do I do instead? And here's my gift to you. Use time. It's the first thing that you want to do. Whenever there's a situation where you're about to lose all of your steam and you're just about to go off, use time. Buy yourself time. Take a step back. Be quiet. Use time, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like whatever you need to do. Somebody told me that they had hand sanitizer always in their pockets, even before COVID. And anytime her kids were doing something that she was going to shout, she would pour, not hand sanitizer, sorry, lotion. She would pour it on her hand and she would start rubbing her hands like this. However long it took her to rub the lotion helps her calm down. So use time to calm down. You absolutely need to use time right now to calm down.
Thank you, Remy. In the interest of time, because we're running a little close to the end of this, we do have a few questions from some of our attendees. So we wanted to go ahead and get those answered before closing out. And if not, Blessing, let me know if you want to send them in. But I guess in the meantime, Dr. Robin, Dr. Reem, do you have any last words for any tips, any advice, burnout, COVID? Please let us know.
I guess I can start. We were talking a lot about guilt, and something I want parents to know is that sleep is not just a want, it's a need. We are all human beings with 3 basic biological needs: to eat, to sleep, and to breathe. You don't just want to sleep, you need it. Your kids don't just want to sleep, they need it. So take away the guilt. It's something that is a necessity in our life. It's not just a luxury. And in order to be successful as parents and as employees and CEOs and whatever job you have, we have the hardest job on earth being parents, and sleep is a necessity to be successful. So take that guilt off yourself and make it a priority.
Dr. Reem?
Sorry. I would add that one of the things that I talk about when I work with moms and burnout is to change our expectations, particularly right now. If you're wondering, why am I not doing all of these things and doing them perfectly? It's because it's not possible. So when we change the dialogue that we have about ourselves and stop demonizing ourselves and stop putting ourselves down and using language or thoughts about ourselves that make us sound like we're failing, when we start targeting those thoughts and have a little bit more compassion towards ourselves, write it down to put it everywhere. I write with dry erase markers on my mirror in my bathroom, and I leave myself statements that I need to hear and that like my soul needs to be nourished with. So speak it out loud, say it out loud, and your kids are watching, so they'll learn self-compassion. And there's really no greater gift to give your kids than to show them how to love themselves. So that's my piece. But if you want to learn more about that, you can follow me along at Psyched Mommy.
Thank you. Remy, any last word? before we wrap up?
Yes. So for me, I would say give yourself some grace. Give yourself some grace. Things are going to happen. Let me tell you, you're going to shout. Okay.